how can we reframe our idea of retirement till then like be able to make that switch of, oh, it's actually a number? Like, how did you reorient your idea of what
Mm,
retirement was?
yeah, I mean, I think before 2018, I had always just assumed retirement was when you were 65, and hopefully I just didn't have a job that I hated between now and then.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like really learning and understanding the math.
Jessica, welcome back to the show. It is nice to have you back here to talk about one of my favorite topics, financial independence, and specifically the concept of Coast Fi. If you are tuning into the show today and you are recalling seeing Jessica's name before, she has been on the podcast. So we're going to link that episode in the show notes so you guys can uh, hear about her origin story. And on today's show, we're going to catch up on your Coast FI journey. There's been a lot of changes both in your career and in your personal life since we last spoke. So I'm really excited to dive into all of that. And also for folks who are just hearing about the concept of Coast Fi, we're going to talk about what it is, how you can actually achieve it. Is it actually realistic in this era of everything is hella expensive and more? But first off, let's start with an intro. Jess, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me back on the
For
podcast.
sure.
I love it. So, a little bit about me. I am a co founder of the Fioneers, but our focus is on how do we design lives we absolutely love along the path to financial independence. And so, for us, that's looked like a lot of twists and turns and, slowing down and not racing toward that finish line. And so a couple things about me. I'm a part-time van lifer, absolutely love outdoor adventure, spend a lot of time hiking mountains. Um, and I do, some part-time work with the Pioneers on the side of all of that living.
Yeah. So, how long have you been now in the financial independence space? Because you guys are considered like one of the OGs. When I was first, getting into the five movement, it was maybe 2016, and y'all were already players in the game. So, when did you first find out about it, and then when did you guys start to actually pursue it?
So, interestingly enough, I would say we weren't actually one of the OGs because
Hmm.
we didn't start until 2018.
Oh,
So
really?
there was
Okay.
like a whole wave of like the Mr. Money Mustache and Mr. 1500 and
Financial
all
samurai.
of
Yeah.
that, yeah, all of those people. And they were some of the people that we learned from and decided we wanted to do things a little differently.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so in some ways we almost felt like we were second wave, second wave financial independence of like, okay, we have all of these like really extreme, like frugal focused voices, like let's get to FI as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And we showed up in the space in 2018. I learned about financial independence really that year.
Hmm.
And kind of dove into it, but dove into it in our own way, which was we're seeing these early people like get to financial independence and be like a little bit miserable
Mm.
or telling us maybe you could have taken a slower path along the way. And so we really took that to heart and decided to chart our own course and do things differently and
Hmm.
share that journey along the way with people.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention kind of the extreme frugality of the movement in its origin because when I talk to people who find out about financial independence, it is typically through some of the folks that you've mentioned. And they're often like just immediately turned off to the idea of just like, wait, you're asking me to live like a broke ass college student? Like, why would I do that again? And it's just
Mhm.
like, which I could totally relate to because I had the same exact reaction up
Mhm.
front. And I'm just like, well, I'm not going to be able to live on $20,000 a year living in a high cost of living area like New Jersey, which was where I was located at
Mhm.
that time. And so immediately it was like both off putting, but then also like really demotivating because there wasn't all of these different flavors, if you will, that now we talk about when it comes to financial independence. And so you guys are particularly passionate about the Coast 5 movement. So let's talk about it, right? So what is it
Mhm.
actually referring to when we say coast FI or coast fi?
Mhm. So it doesn't mean that you live on one of the coasts.
I mean, that's
Uh,
nice though, if you like the ocean.
we do sort of live on one of the coasts, but that's not what it means. So basically, what it means is you've saved and invested enough already that based on your age, you no longer need to contribute to another dollar to your retirement accounts because what you've already invested will grow to provide you what you need at your traditional or chosen retirement age.
Mhm.
And this was in for me like a really life-changing concept. Like I heard about this in I think 2018, 2019, right? As I was going through some mental health crises and figuring out what do I want work to look like for me. And, going back to work part time and all of that. And then I learned about this idea of Coast Fi, right? The fact that you can get your investments to a certain place. And if you're young, if you're like under the age of 40 and have quite a while for your money to compound, that number is surprisingly low.
Mhm.
And so for us at the age of 31, realized we had reached Coast Fi. And so then my question was for myself, what if I never need to work full time ever again?
Mhm.
And that was incredibly freeing. And from there, just like went down the rabbit hole to say, like, what if more people knew about this and could get themselves to a place where they had already saved and invested enough? They didn't have to add another dollar. All they needed to do was cover their actual costs of living.
Mhm.
What would that allow people to do in their lives?
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and I just think it's so inspiring to be able to see the types of things that people are doing, whether it be start businesses, reduce their work hours. Sometimes it's taking more risks and being more outspoken about the things that matter to them.
Mhm.
And sometimes for people, it's spending more money for a period of time
Yeah.
to make specific investments to build the life that they want.
Mhm.
And so it's so cool to see what people do with this freedom.
I'm seeing like the trends around mini retirements or mini sabbaticals being like a very big topic, for folks who want to, take career breaks, maybe explore passion projects. And, if this is something that you actually want to do, like you need to learn about Coast Buy, because when you can build up
Mhm.
your financial foundation to a place where, you're not having to worry about future you is taken care of. Like you mentioned, you can take a lot more risks. You can
Mhm.
take those career breaks. You can go do the digital nomad thing, or like take some time off to have a baby, raise a family. Like there's so many options that come from setting up your financial foundation. I think the first thing that people get wrong about retirement in general is still associating it with like a specific age, right? Many of us just believe
Mhm.
that retirement is age 65 or whatever year you would qualify for social security, if it even exists, at that point. Um so how can we reframe our idea of retirement till then like be able to make that switch of, oh, it's actually a number. Like, how did you reorient your idea of what
Mm.
retirement was?
Yeah, I mean, I think before 2018, I had always just assumed retirement was when you were 65,
Yeah.
and hopefully I just didn't have a job that I hated between now and then.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like really learning and understanding the math behind it of saying like you're financially independent when in general, you have 25 times your annual expenses saved and invested in the stock market. And then, you can math it out right at that point. And we do. So we have a CoastFi calculator that I think over like 10,000 people have downloaded and used
Oh, wow.
at this point that can help you math it out, right? And figure out, okay, what, you know, what is my Coast Fi number today if I want to retire at 65? But
Mhm.
what is my Coast Fi number today if I want to retire at 55? Right? Or 50. Like those are options that you can also put in there
Yeah.
to figure out, right, the math of it to see how much freedom do I actually have today and how much freedom am I going to have in the future.
Mhm.
Um, I think one thing that I would say is I do feel like the fire movement generally is a little bit fixated on this idea of retirement.
Okay.
Um, And I don't think we need to be. Like, I think,
Explain.
like like, I think I mean, eventually, we all wanna be in a place where we no longer need to work, right,
Right.
for income. Um, but whether, like whether that happens at 65, whether that happens at 55, whether that happens at 45, like I don't know, I think we get hung up on the timelines when I think the reality is that what we want is a better, happier life that we have more autonomy and control over how we spend our time.
Mhm.
And so I think for me, now that I'm in a place where like, yeah, I still do need to generate income. I still need to cover my expenses. Um, but I think the idea is now like I'm doing that, doing work that's really meaningful, that I enjoy, that gives me flexibility to
Yeah.
live life in the way that I want to. And so in some ways it's like I will eventually reach financial independence. Probably if I do the math sometime in my 50s.
Mhm.
Um, but it almost doesn't matter when, if I'm designing a life that I want to be living along the way,
Yeah.
like that urgency feels a whole lot less. And I think more people, if they could build the financial foundation, right, to get to Coast Fi, and then use it to design their life in the way that gives them that freedom and flexibility,
Mhm.
um, there wouldn't be as much of a urgency to get to that retirement date.
I agree with you. And it's funny because I feel like even folks who are like the talking heads in the financial independence movement, a lot of them aren't retired like by any sense of the
Mhm,
traditional word where you just like don't work. For me, I've noticed more and more that it is just having the options to work or not to work. And if you do work,
mhm.
you can work
Yeah.
on passion projects and it's not just about earning as much
Mhm.
as you have to. It's really
Yeah.
just about having like that flexibility over your time. And
Mhm.
I think
Yep.
that is what most people want. It's not necessarily to like
Mhm.
go and face plant in the grass and like
Mhm.
go sit on your rocking
Right.
chair until
Yeah,
the maker comes
exactly.
for you. I think we
Right,
all need a purpose in
exactly.
life, right? And so for me, it's
Mhm.
also um quite relevant as I see older folks in my family like retire in their traditional sense. It doesn't look enjoyable to just not have any
Mm.
reason for getting up in the morning. Like I've noticed folks, their mental health tends to decline, their physical health, because they just don't have like that thing that for most people is work that gets them up and like drives their day and their
Mhm.
social calendar and all these things. So I think it's important
Mhm.
to think about not just hitting that retirement goal, but like what does retirement actually look like for you so that
Mhm.
you don't find yourself, like you mentioned, one of these
Yeah.
early pioneers feeling like miserable. you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's
And,
talk
like,
about that for you.
luckily
Like
oh, say
when you and
go
your
ahead.
husband started talking about, achieving this, like what did the idyllic post Coast FI life look like?
So interesting. Well, first, we did start out thinking, "We're gonna go after financial independence just at like a slower, happier pace." And
Mhm.
so we did envision that life. And I think it's important to envision that life. Like if money was no object, what would we do with our
Mhm.
time? And I actually have a blog post from 2018 that articulates that we talked about how we would love to be able to travel as much as we wanted to, possibly do like some nomadic long-term travel, um, entrepreneurial projects, like stuff that we were interested in, were like the two main components. And then, sort of fitting in all around that was a focus on health, right, and relationships.
Mhm.
Um, and so we articulated this vision. We had no idea at that time, like, would the Fioneers become anything? I hadn't started my business doing coaching yet. We were both working in, traditional jobs at the time. And that vision, though, for us almost like served in some ways as like a North Star
Mhm.
to say, to not just say, how do we get to FI so we can do these things, but how do we build these things into our life along the path? And so, at first it was in small ways. And then when we learned about Coast Fi, we were like, wow, I think we would be able to cover our expenses and live this post Fi ideal lifestyle because we wanted to do entrepreneurial projects. We, can create a business where we can hopefully work from the road and traveling if we want to,
Mhm.
and build it in a way that it's like part-time that allows us to focus on health and relationships and, the other things that are important to us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it started with that FI vision and then realizing we didn't need to be FI to
Mm.
make that vision a reality, that like Coast FI could get us really, 99%, if not 100% of the way there.
That's really interesting. Okay. So let's talk about the actual strategy behind how you guys started to implement the decision making in your finances with your career to actually get to a place. So when
Mhm.
you first found out about this, where were you in terms of like retirement accounts? What were you contributing, like percentage wise? And like, how did those things change in order to get you to a place where you actually were able to achieve Coast Vibe?
Yeah, so when we first heard about it, I mean, we've always been like savers. We started out our careers with extremely low incomes,
And
like
what field were you guys
collectively,
working in?
nonprofits.
Oh yeah, okay.
And collectively, I think like in our second year out of college, we made like $30,000 combined
Jeez.
before taxes living in northern New Jersey, right outside New York City.
Oh my god.
So like we didn't save anything then. But then as our income grew, we did inflate our lifestyle somewhat, but we had created good habits around like spending our money intentionally because of that lack of income early on. And so we did start to save and invest in our mid 20s.
Okay.
And by the time we learned about or by the time I learned about financial independence, we were already saving about 30 to 35% of our income.
Okay.
Um,
That's quite a substantial number for anybody, just in general.
yeah.
And I'm curious, like, did you ever feel like it was you were over saving, like for the quality of life that you guys would have wanted to have?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I don't think so,
Hmm.
because it's interesting because up to that point, and I hate to say this, but up to that point, my husband was managing our money and I didn't want anything to do with it. I'm a terrible feminist. But I'm now very involved in the process. But he knew about financial independence and he every year would be like, let's just save 5% more. And I would be like, as long as we can take the trip, as long as we can do the thing, like I was the one that was like, why? And but the thing was that it was like, as long as I can do the things that I want to do,
Hmm.
and we don't need to feel like we're pinching the pennies, then like, sure, allocate 5% more to retirement accounts,
Yeah.
whatever. And so we weren't necessarily on the same page about things at that point, but I was the one that was like, "Let's make sure we're living a good life today."
Mhm.
So I do feel like we had that balance as we were, creating, um, yeah, as we were building up to that
Okay.
savings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're saving between like 30 and 35% of your income. So how did that
Mhm.
shift when you guys got intentional about hitting your Coast Fi number?
So, interestingly enough, um, we did actually then increase our savings rate to around 50%.
Mm,
Um, Part of it was without doing a whole lot to try,
okay.
which is interesting,
Yeah. Explain that.
because, there were some, intentional choices that we made, but most of it was I took that career break and I was no longer totally miserable.
Mm,
Uh, and then once I wasn't totally miserable anymore, we started spending a whole lot less money
huh.
without even, like, knowing. Like, we didn't just, like and it was, like, 6 months in that we were like, "Why do we have so much just cash in our account?" And we, like, looked, because we didn't, like, make the connection that we were, like, spending that much less, and we realized it we, like, categorized it and realized that in the first year of me no longer working in, like, a toxic full-time job, we spent $17,000 less than the year before, and it was on all things that I would consider convenience and escape. So it was like takeout, easy to cook groceries from the, like, pre-cut vegetables, like that crap.
Hmm.
Um, like, we still traveled, but we were able to, like, think about, like, how do you get a travel deal or use a travel hack,
Yeah.
or I could get a book from the library, or we just didn't need the, like, hit of dopamine to, like, buy the random thing off Amazon
Hmm.
that was gonna, like, make us feel better momentarily. And so we had I had my husband increased his income. I had a reduction in income because I went back to work part-time.
Hmm.
But then that's around the time that I started my business too. And so it was actually after I quit climbing the corporate ladder, worked part-time, built my business, that we had our highest, like, savings rate years.
Go figure. So what you're telling me is that a lot of people are using money as a form of medication to treat an ailment, which might be burnout, which might be you hate your job, which might be it's some sort of coping mechanism for something that's
Mhm.
wrong with your life. And so you're using money as a bandage, as a way to mask with the actual origin of the issue. And I can totally
Mhm.
relate to that because when I look back at specifically like my travel habits when I was in corporate America, like I was never going to be one that you were going to convince to not use every single paid day off. Like I was
Mhm.
using my sick time, my funeral days, my I just needed to maximize my time off of work and I was always had to travel. Like you were not going to convince me that like taking a week off and staying home was a good use of my time because travel for me became a way to escape. It was a form of
Mhm.
escapism. It was like, well, this is what all the sacrifice and the stress and the drama is for. It's because I get to go on nice trips and have all these pictures that I get to put on
Mhm.
Instagram. But like, lo and behold, you're coming back to the same environment. I found myself like in a cycle of debt paying for these trips because it's not like I was planning for them. I'm like, we'll just put on a credit card, but I need to take time off because I'm freaking burnt out. So I think it's important for us to kind of look at what we do with our money and really start to have these honest conversations with yourself about like, do you actually need all the money that you're spending? Or are you spending some of this to mask a greater issue that probably should be addressed? And that can help you, like, once you address that, can actually help you get to your financial goals faster.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because so for us, we learned about Coast Fi and realized we reached it, like, right around the time that I started working part-time.
Mm,
And for us, that gave and I started working part-time because I felt like that's what my mental health could handle, my
mhm,
mental health and burnout could handle in that moment. And then when we learned about Coast-Fi, it was like, oh, well, I just won't increase my hours. Like I was planning on it going back to full-time work. But now that gave me the freedom not to do that. Um, and it's interesting because like we assumed that making that change would like decrease our savings rate and make it so that we, would it would take longer for us to reach FI.
mhm.
And instead, I had all this time and energy to focus on passion projects and I built my business. We increased our savings rate even more and we were like, this wasn't what was supposed to happen. We're Coast-Fi. Like we used this freedom to like make some changes, but it didn't make an impact on our finances.
Mhm.
Right, or our timelines or anything. Well, it made a positive one. It didn't make a negative, right? It didn't make have a lengthening impact.
Yeah.
And so then at that point, we were like, okay, great. So what next? Like, what's the next thing that we can do to start aligning our lives with this vision that we created for ourselves? Because this first step of working part time and having more time for health and relationships and starting a business, like that didn't negatively impact us at all.
Mm, mhm.
And so then we were like, well, we wanted to explore this extended travel. And it was during the pandemic. So we started to explore van life. And we like invested in doing a van life experiment where we rented a camper van, absolutely loved it. And then used a lot of the cash flow that we would have used that would have been our savings rate over a 2-year period to buy and build out a camper van.
Okay.
Right. And so that was a large one-time purchase that helped us to invest in and create this like travel lifestyle
Mhm.
that we wanted to have. And it was before we reduced our income. So it like gave us the confidence to say, oh, we can dramatically reduce our savings rate. And like compounding still does its thing. It was like we knew it logically,
Yeah.
but like then we built our own evidence by seeing it happen ourselves.
Mhm.
And so that was the really the next thing that we did. And then we realized, okay, we're still okay. Like we took, my husband was still working full time and we took the longest trip that he could take, which was 3 weeks at the time. And then he started thinking about taking a sabbatical the following year. And then we sort of got to a place where again we were like, this didn't really have a huge negative impact on us. Like things are better, things are looking good. So what next?
Mhm.
Right? The question has always been like, okay, so what's the next step
Right.
to get us toward this vision? So then as he was thinking about the sabbatical, he realized he didn't really want to go back.
As usually happens, I think a lot of women who go out on maternity leave have that like epiphany too,
Yeah.
where it's just like, I actually like this. I
Mhm.
don't want to go back to work.
Yeah, yeah, um so we ultimately then made the decision at that point to you fully leverage this Coast Fi freedom that we had built. And so he left his job in early 2023,
Mhm.
and joined. First, he took like a year off as like a sabbatical to figure out what he wanted to do. He decided to join, the Fioneers as like his main gig. Started our YouTube channel. And since he quit, we haven't saved or invested a single dollar. And again, we look at it and we're like, the math is still mathing.
Okay. So you have literally not saved for retirement since 2023, and you are still on track to a traditional retirement at this point. Or are you actually like on track for early retirement?
We thought we would be on track for traditional retirement and we're on track for an early retirement.
And so
Like
around
things
what age
are
would that look like for you guys?
I think we're on track if everything stayed the same for, like, a retirement at, like, 45,
Holy shit.
which is not at all what we ever thought was gonna happen.
And how old are you guys right now?
38.
So you're about 7 years out. And you just
Yeah,
learned about financial independence at 31.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. I think it's important to like have this context because y'all like it is so possible to radically change your financial life in like 5 years or less. And I look back at my own journey of finding out about FI in 2016. By 2021, I had hit my Coast FI number. I walked away from corporate, never looked back. And like you mentioned, the compounding effect just continues to do its thing. Now, I still actively invest, and especially now that I have a daughter, like I'm really excited about building her little nest egg. But it is incredible what happens when you just get super intentional about setting up future you for options by
Mhm,
putting together your financial freedom plan. So I want to do a quick exercise because I actually downloaded your calculator because I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this conversation and like, yeah, cool, sounds great. What the hell does it
mhm,
actually like look like to calculate your FI number, your post FI
mhm,
number? So let's run a typical, scenario. Let's say you are currently 30 years old and maybe you want to retire at, let's say, 57.
mhm.
So you have your calculator here. We can type in those data points. A safe withdrawal rate. For folks who don't understand what that refers to, can you just give us a brief description of a safe withdrawal rate and like what is typical?
Yeah, so a safe withdrawal rate would be the percentage of your portfolio that you can withdraw without running out of money,
Hmm.
right? Late in your later years.
Yeah.
And the consensus used to be that it was around 4%. And now the person who actually created that quote unquote rule of thumb is now saying it's really like worst case scenario is 4.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So most people still use 4%. That gives you like a really good buffer though.
Okay.
Hmm.
Great. Okay, so we're going to go with the 4% safe withdrawal assumption. And the next field is the inflation adjusted growth rate. So this is where we are using historical data from the stock
Hmm.
market over the past 100 years. Specifically, the S&P 500 has averaged about 7 to 10%.
Hmm.
And so you can use, somewhere around that number. Let's, for the sake of us being conservative, let's go with 7%.
Hmm.
Assuming inflation, is around
Yep.
2 to 3%. Your annual expenses. So this is a really important number. I think this is where folks get confused. They think about their income versus expenses. You need to actually understand like how much do you need on an annual basis to live the lifestyle that you want. And that number can vary for
Hmm.
a myriad of reasons, including if you are a single Pringle, if you are partnered, if you have children, where you live,
Yep.
what your lifestyle is. If you are the type of person that you find a lot of joy in like low cost free activities, or if you are a splurge queen and you want to like, book the 5-star resorts,
Hmm.
like this is where you and your family have to get very intentional and like
Yep.
decide what does our ideal life look like and how much would it cost on average in a year.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's say that you're like fancy bougie like me. I love me a good first class airline ticket and a nice hotel. So let's say that my desired life costs $100,000 a year. I'm going to put
Hmm.
that number in. And let's assume that you have no passive income because, there's ways to
Hmm.
obviously supplement your income in financial independence so that maybe that number that you save up in the stock market doesn't have to be as big. You
Hmm.
could have real estate. You could have, in my case, I have a blog that generates a significant amount of income. So, assuming that you're like most people that don't have a significant source of passive income, we'll leave that number at zero. And so, according to this, my FI number is $2.5 million. Okay. So
Hmm.
that is total what I need to have invested to live off of. If you can reach $402,326 by the age of 30, then you have reached Coast FI. That's how I'm reading this calculator. Is that accurate?
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
Okay. Great.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so this I feel like this calculator needs to be a gift to every single 18-year-old person who is graduating out into going out into the world.
Mhm,
If you know your Coast Fi number at the age of 18, you can very realistically get to that goal by the time you're, early
mhm.
30s, and
Yep.
very realistically put yourself in a position where you never have to work a job that you
Mhm,
hate again.
mhm,
That is
yeah.
hella empowering, and I feel like I wish my parents
Mhm.
had told me that. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast also wish they'd gotten that
Mhm.
lesson.
Yep. So I recently met, someone who had learned about financial independence in college,
Gosh, so
and
lucky.
he was 23, and had reached Coast Fi, and I was like, "Well, tell me more. I would love to." And for him, reaching Coast Fi was having just about $100,000 saved and invested
The earlier
at
you
the age
start,
of
the better.
23.
Oh my
It's
god.
absolutely incredible. One thing that I would say, though, is I don't think that Coast-Fi is necessarily just for those who are younger,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So, for
Yeah, because I
example,
think some
like
folks might be like, "Well, I'm 45, so what the hell's the point? I'm
yeah,
never gonna be able to retire."
exactly. So actually, do you wanna put 45 into the calculator?
Let's do that. So if we're starting at the age of 45 today, and
Mhm.
let's say your goal is to retire traditional, 65.
Yeah. Mhm.
And maybe you're not as bougie as me. Maybe your annual expenses, let's say you dream of maybe going back to where your family's from and the cost of living there is much lower.
Mm.
Let's say you want to move like to Central or South America. So I'm going to assume a $50,000 annual expense number. And then that would bring your FI number down to $1.25 million.
Mhm.
Amazing. Okay. Did I just break
And
the
the
calculator?
Coast-Fi number at 45 would be
Let's see.
what?
Hold on. I think I broke the calculator. I'm, I'm messing around too much with this. Okay, hold on. Let me reopen this. I will retell that segment. Hold on a sec. I think I deleted the formula in one. Okay, this is what I did. All right, so 45. We're going to assume 65 retirement age and a $50,000 annual expense. So if you can reach $323,000 by age 45, you can hit your financial independence goal. So I think, obviously the biggest question is what is it going to take to live your ideal lifestyle?
Mm.
And
Yep.
obviously we have to be realistic too about our income. Like, are there areas of your budget that you can cut down on, that you can get creative with? This is when we start thinking about things like
Mhm.
house hacking or supplementing your income with a side hustle or, a
Yep.
career pivot that might make you more marketable and therefore able to earn more. Like, financial independence does just not happen by accident. It takes
Mhm.
very intentional decision making. But I think it's as long as
Mhm.
you know kind of where that target is, you have a place to
Yep.
start to then start to make those optimizations, right?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And actually, could you put the $100,000 of spending for the person starting at 45
Sure. Okay, let's
so we
see.
can see what the difference is?
Ooh, okay. So it goes from 323 to 646. So basically double
Okay.
that number.
Yeah, but if the person was 30 and wanting to retire at 57, it was closer to 400, so it's about $200,000 more, which that means you have 15 more years to get to that $600,000
Hmm.
that will grow, right?
Yeah.
To provide you with what you need in retirement. So then at 45, if you can get to the 600, then you have so much more freedom and flexibility to only cover your actual costs and ask yourself, what's the next change
Hmm.
that I can make,
Yeah.
right? What's the next thing that I can do to shift to get more in alignment with what
Hmm.
my ideal looks like?
Yeah. I think it's also important too to get really intentional about like accidental windfalls and things that you have when it comes to money. So when
Mm,
I think
yep.
about what my biggest like success factors were in financial independence, it was definitely side hustling. It was
Mhm,
definitely like having a period of intense debt payoff. And then
mhm,
instead of using the money that I had been using for debt to inflate my lifestyle, I was already so
Mhm.
trained to like sending an extra $1,000, $2,000 to a student loan payment that it just was like second nature to then funnel that money towards investing, right? So like so much of this
Mhm.
stuff is just like training yourself on those wealth
Yep.
building habits that then make this intuitive versus feeling
Mhm.
like it's not in your nature to like save or invest, right?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and I identify a lot with what you're saying too. We didn't have student debt, but we did, similar. I mean, I think it's a similar mindset that we started out with having such low incomes that then it was like once we our biggest lever was then earning more,
Mhm.
right, and building our careers, and then once we did that, right, we had the habits already
Yeah.
of being intentional with our money. So when we got more of it, we were like, what are the ways that we want to inflate our lifestyle? Oh,
Mhm.
we would like to live in a apartment that has in-unit washer and dryer.
Right. Real luxury, okay? And coming from New Jersey to Florida, where like it's very common for New Jersey
Yeah,
apartments not to have laundry,
yeah,
I realized after coming here that like, you know, I could make sacrifices to get
yeah.
to the goal.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, for sure, right, and so, yeah, so we made those right, we made those choices, um, but really, a significant portion of those raises and salary increases, like, went toward saving and investing, and
Mhm.
it didn't feel like a sacrifice because we were also inflating our lifestyle at the time with, a certain percentage of that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
I would definitely encourage people as they do get those raises and promotions to think critically about how do I want to inflate my lifestyle? Like what's going to give me the most value here?
Mhm.
And then use a significant portion of that toward saving and investment to build
It's that
yourself
values
some freedom.
based spending that I think is really, really critical. When I started, quote, paying myself first and just, treating my investments like a non negotiable line item, that's when things really started to shift for sure. Um, so let's talk about one of the main reasons that I feel like a lot of people are feel fearful around financial independence, and rightfully so, especially if you're based here in the United States. Healthcare is one of these things that is intrinsically tied to having a traditional job. And so for many people, especially folks who, might be the breadwinner, who might be the ones who provide insurance for their families, who have children, who have chronic illness, how can we still pursue financial independence while also like planning for the expensive ass cost of healthcare and it not becoming the thing that derails your financial independence journey?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I do think the way that we've thought about it is yes, healthcare costs are high, and that's a cost we're incorporating and like willing to pay for our freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think some people one thing that I hear often is, well, I could never do that because I need company sponsored health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, but at the same time, I think any challenge that we come up against can be solvable, right? It's just it's not ideal. Like I wish
Yeah.
we had universal health care and we didn't have to pay tons of money for it. And we can figure out what the cost is and incorporate that into our plans.
Yeah.
And maybe, when we do that, we might realize like, oh, I might need to work a little bit longer to pad the investments
Mm-hmm.
because right, I need to plan for a higher level of spending each year than I initially thought. So I think it's important to actually like get clarity on what those numbers are. Um, Another thing that I would say too is so we have our health insurance through the marketplace through
Mm-hmm.
the Affordable Care Act, and we do like Some years I guess we get subsidies, some years we don't get subsidies. It depends on like how much money we bring in and
Mhm.
what we spend that year and all of that. Um, but we are definitely some of the people who would be affected if the premium, like the premium tax credits are not renewed,
Mhm.
or if they're taken off the table. Um, and I think a big part of that is saying, like, I don't necessarily, I don't know, like, I don't feel like I need to have certainty about that to have confidence to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
Like, I think there is uncertainty, and I can have confidence for two reasons. I think one of them is I have clarity around my finances. Um, But if something goes catastrophically wrong and I realize, like, I was wrong, I need to make more money or, I need to adjust, I trust in my ability to do so.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like
Yeah.
I would be able to adjust if and when needed.
Mhm.
And actually, I don't know if you know this, but you posted something like way back in the day on Instagram that like really impacted me.
Oh.
And I like still use it to talk to people. And it's a quote from you that's like, my financial independence doesn't come from my portfolio or whatever. It comes from my ability to generate income
Mm.
and like my ability to be a right. It's like, and sure, that's not like the whatever technical definition of financial independence, but I feel like it's like that's where the confidence and stability comes from for
Yeah.
me, is trusting myself that I can be a resourceful problem solver if things take a turn for the worst.
Yeah. I love that perspective and I love that sort of mindset because part of what I think is required to successfully achieve financial independence is almost like a little bit of a delusional confidence, right? Like you kind of have to be okay with bucking the system, with people like side eyeing you and be like, well, why the hell are you trying to retire early? Like, what do you guys mean you're saving 50% of your income? What do you mean you're starting a side hustle? Like just all the different things that we do to kind of make our lives
Mhm.
like extraordinary. They do take a little bit of risk, and they do take confronting fears and doing things that
Yeah.
maybe others are not comfortable doing. So I love that the framing of that perspective of just like whatever comes your way, you will have the capacity to figure out how best to face that challenge, right? Because I mean,
Mhm.
there's only so much we
Yeah.
can control. We can't control the politics of this situation. We can't control like who's in charge. Decision
Mhm.
makers that literally don't even know who we are like making all these changes and rules that can impact us. So it's like if you know what the potential scenarios are right now, what can you start to do to plan? Right. And that might
Mhm.
be like, hey, I'm going to make sure I max out my HSA this year because I just want to have extra cash reserves for healthcare costs. Or maybe it's
Mhm.
like you start investigating alternative healthcare plans now, or you start talking to your providers and start to see like, what would it look like if I'm just paying cash for your services and I just opt out of having insurance? Because a lot of people don't even realize that you can do that. And often you can negotiate rates that are better than what your insurance is having you pay. So there's just, it's good to be informed, but it's also even better to like be proactive, I would say. Right.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, one interesting thing is, yeah, like the problem all of these are solvable problems. Like we're resourceful problem solvers
Yeah.
and we'll be able, I believe, to like figure out solutions to the problems that arise.
Hmm.
And actually there was one woman in our Coast with Confidence cohort last fall who, there's all of these people in the program who are like mid 30s and like, I'm so worried I'm going to like lose everything, which, like I've had that feeling too,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it's important for us to be able to voice that and to be able to work through that. But she was in her mid 50s, and she said something that was really wise. She was like, you all are like so worried about like making a decision that like, really like that you lose everything. And, and she was like, I'm an immigrant from Venezuela.
Mm,
Like, I moved to Canada at the age of 37 with a suitcase. And like, I started over and rebuilt my career
yeah.
at the age of 37.
Wow.
And she's like, and I'm 55 today. I hit Coast Fi. I'm figuring out like like what I want to do with this freedom. And she's like, so
Suck it
you
up,
all
Buttercup.
no, 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 that's not what she said. What she said was she was actually very, very encouraging, and she may have been inside thinking, like you people, but she was like, "If I have the full belief that every single one of you, if you lost everything and needed to start over today, that you could.
Mm,
And you're not starting from 0.
yeah.
You're starting from 15 to 20 years more of life experience
Right.
that you can bring to bear. Like, would it be uncomfortable? Yes. If you needed to like restart everything over, but could you do it?
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And so I feel like that whenever I get to the place where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm so worried about these risks that I'm taking, I think like, one, let me look at the evidence. It's really not all that risky. Two, like if something crazy happened, right? And I did lose everything. Like I came out of college like right after the Great Recession. There
Yeah.
were no jobs. I made $10,000 a year doing AmeriCorps.
Wow.
And like made it work. And then I grew my career and I was 20 whatever and didn't know anything about anything at that point. Like nothing. I
Yeah.
knew nothing.
Yeah.
Um and like I'm 38. I have, 18 well no, 16 more years of life experience from that point that I
Mhm.
would be able to bring to bear if I needed to start over again.
Yeah.
And so and I just love that and always think about that and I would love for people to take this to heart as they're thinking about one, if they're starting right now, you can do it, right? If you're thinking about making changes and you're worried, like, what am I going to do if I lose everything? One, you're probably not going to lose everything. And two, if you did, I am confident that you would still be okay and you would figure it out because you figured it out before and you can do it again.
Mm. I love this message, Jessica. I love your more nuanced, more holistic approach to financial independence. And I love what you talk about in the sense of just like empowering your life with money to build an intentional life, one that feels like you are giving yourself options even before reaching, the traditional financial independence definition. So, for folks who want to be in your orbit, who want to find out more about the Fioneers, where is the best place for us to find you?
Yeah, they can find us on our website, which is thefioneers.com, like pioneers, but with an F. And there they can find that Coast Fi calculator if they want to calculate their Coast Fi number.
Mhm.
And then also they can find us on YouTube as well. And on YouTube, we're at Fioneers.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here and for reminding us that financial independence is within reach for more of us than we think. And there are really, really intentional ways that we can start to incorporate the elements of FI right now in your current life. And it really just does start out with knowing your numbers, knowing what is possible. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. If you love this episode, make sure to share it with someone that you think would find it useful. Make sure that you watch the video version on YouTube. And until I see you next time, stay poderosa. Thanks, Jessica.